This is the moment we've all been waiting for the thousands in attendance and the millions watching around the world. Let's get ready to rumble!
Welcome to the Junkyard Pod. I'm Tony Pesta, joined by Jackson Flickinger, and the NBA season began about 3 weeks ago, and the Cleveland Cavaliers have still not lost a game. I can't even imagine how embarrassing it must feel for all those teams that have lost. I just know the rest of the NBA has to be so ashamed, but the Cavs to start this season are a perfect 12-0. It seems like they're winning games that feel like they should be scheduled losses, and then the games where they have it going, they're just absolutely obliterating teams. Right now, they rank third in point differential, second in offense, sixth in defense. Jackson, what's your biggest takeaway to start this season?
I'm going to take us in a different direction right now, right off the top. Tony, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Will you apologize?
To who? To the bench?
Will you apologize to Darius Garland for thinking that Tyrese Halliburton was better than him?
Oh my goodness. You're going to try and flip this on me? I'm record.
I'm just asking if you will apologize.
Well, let's set the record straight. I went on record saying that I thought Tyrese...
Actually, you did not go on record. I think this was like a text.
Maybe I said it before we started recording. Regardless, last season, I said somewhere at some point, entering last year, that Tyrese Halliburton was getting the hype that Darius Garland should have. I then walked that back around, I think like February of this year when Tyrese was looking like an all-NBA player and Darius was having a pretty bad season. So don't let Jackson fool you.
Will you apologize?
I will apologize for walking it back. I should have stood my ground.
That's what I'm saying.
In the DG hive. Okay.
That's
yeah.
Well,
I have another apology. I have another apology
apology
that I'm going to give out later in the episode.
Okay,
I'll give it out
good.
later. I have it saved. But yes, I apologize, Darius Garland. I should have never turned my back. He is having the breakout year that I thought he was going to have last year, which I always knew was possible.
I mean,
I
think you thought he was going to have it for the last like 4 years, just for the record. So,
well, you know what? Here's the thing to end the Tyrese talk. The issue there wasn't that I was low on. It wasn't that I was too high on Garland. It's that I was too low on Tyrese. And it turns out maybe they're closer than we thought. Maybe I was right all along.
Maybe you were just right. So that's something to consider.
But bringing this back to the Cavs 12-0 start, Cavs are absolutely killing it. What's your biggest takeaway here? We've already talked a lot about this team and this start, but what do you think is the number one thing they've learned so far?
So I think the number one thing is, I'm a big numbers guy, and they're winning at an 82 game pace. And I think that's kind of the biggest takeaway right now is that if you keep winning at this pace, they'll just never lose. No, the biggest takeaway is Kenny Atkinson. Everything that Kenny Atkinson does is the right move. It's just wild how every hunch that he has is just correct. Like we saw it in the Nets game. I wrote about it on Fear of the Sword about how he stuck with that 4-guard lineup, even though they, the first 2 possessions they were in the game, they gave up offensive rebounds, and then they rebounded to just run the Nets off the floor in the final 5 minutes. Against the Bulls, Kenny's talked about how much he's not liked how his team has come out in the third quarter, and they came out flat once again, the starters did. And he said, fine, I'm just going to go with a whole bench lineup with Dean Wade at the 5, with a bunch of guys who don't play all together and no members of the core 4 out there. And that's what got them back in the game and put them in a position to win it in the end. So there's so many different things that point to how Kenny Atkinson has helped this team, the number 2 offense, all of those things. But it's on a level where it's like you can see it in like how the offense plays, but also in just like the game manager. He's just such a good game manager. And it's insane considering, some of the critiques that we had at various points while doing this podcast about, JB's game management. It just, I know Kenny is getting lucky. I think some of these things that some of his hunches are working like much better than they should. And he's going to have a hunch that goes the wrong way eventually. But right now it's just everything he touches turns to gold.
Yeah, I mean, he's been brilliant to start the year. He's really changed everything. And there was a quote after last night's game that really stood out to me where he said, the old NBA was space, everyone stand, and one guy plays pick and roll. Now there's a lot more cutting players open up space. It creates vacuums and creates driving lanes. I think that's one of the biggest things that we have complained about is that the Cavs in previous seasons kind of felt like, this is going to sound weird, but I think it'll make sense. They were a heliocentric team. They just had two guys who they would, kind of trade places playing that heliocentric ball. They didn't play isolation that often, but they just ran pick and roll over and over and over. And everyone else basically, it was so predictable. Everyone else just kind of stood around. The Cavs are not predictable anymore. They're doing all sorts of weird new things. The Brooklyn game, you mentioned it, him going to the four guards, having the guards screen for each other as much as they have, the movement away from the ball. It's really changed everything for this team. And I want to talk more about that small ball lineup that we saw against Chicago in a second, but I want to, finish off this talk on the 12-0 start by addressing something that maybe we could just ignore, but I'm going to be annoying and address it because I see all the takes on Twitter, the discourse of like...
The discourse. Hate the discourse.
I'm so tired of discourse. Can we have enough of it already? But I've seen.
I mean, you're going on the discourse app, and you're mad
I know
that you're saying discourse. So I think this could be a you problem, but that's fine.
It's a self-defeating cycle. But I've seen the comparisons to the 2015 Atlanta Hawks. I've seen people saying that we can't take the Cavs seriously because they do stuff like this every year. Listen,
not this.
First off, they don't do this every year. We mentioned when they were like 5-0 that they've had good streaks before. 12-0 to start the year with the way they're playing. They've quite literally never played like this. In fact, only 7 other teams in NBA history have ever started 12-0. The Cavs are the 8th team to do that. And the point that I want to make here is that I feel like this is the result of like at least a decade, if not more, of us constantly pretending like the regular season doesn't mean anything and it doesn't matter. And now we're seeing the results of that, where even when a team starts 12-0, all you hear is, well, it doesn't matter. They're a different team in the playoffs. They're not going to do it in the playoffs because they lost the series 2 years ago to the Knicks. And everything has changed since then. So that's all I wanted to say. They're a way different team than they were against New York. They're a different team than they were last year. Donovan Mitchell alone is better than every player that was on that Hawks team. We're comparing them to Jeff Teague. Okay. Like Jeff Teague was like the engine of that team. He was their point guard. I think Darius Garland's a whole lot better.
And Sam Merrill's better than Kyle Korver.
Exactly.
Many are saying
Kyle
this.
Korver coming off the bench, basically.
Yeah.
But that's not even to disrespect the Hawks because that's it. We're just joking. But the point is, if
one
you
thing
can't
I do want to
appreciate
say,
this, it's crazy.
Like, not if you put this Hawks team directly in this era, but if you put a team that was as good as the Hawks in this era, I think they're a title contender just with the parity. You don't, outside of Jokic, there's no one player who is just a buzzsaw that you can't get past. There is no 2015 LeBron James waiting around the corner. So that's where it's like, even if they are the 2015 Hawks, there's no 2015 LeBron. There's no 2015 Steph Curry. So, I think that's, when you're looking at like title windows and stuff like that, it's also about what's around you right now. And I think, the Cavs, I think the teams, there are teams that have separated themselves. You look at the Warriors, you look at the Thunder, the Celtics, those teams have clearly separated themselves, but I don't think that within them, there's like one team that's like, you can't possibly stand up next to them just because they have this one guy that you can't stop. Like, I do know that I do like begrudgingly say that the Celtics are better than the Cavs, but I don't think they are like so much better that, you can't overtake them in a way that like, no matter what the 2015 Hawks did, they didn't have a LeBron James answer. So that's, I think it's apples to oranges when you start talking about things like that.
Yeah, and I mean it's literally the definition of contender, right? It doesn't mean that they're the favorite. It doesn't mean that I think they'll beat Boston or OKC or we could talk about other teams, but it doesn't mean that I think they're the favorite, but they're clearly a contender. They clearly have a fighter's chance right now, and I just think the discourse gets really stupid. And people just, for whatever reason, I think it's just a result of us pretending the regular season doesn't matter. If a team that starts 12-0 doesn't matter, doesn't move you, then like the NBA product is in a really rough spot. I don't think the NBA Cup is going to save that.
One thing you did say, everything has changed since that Knicks series. I'm going to push back a little bit. One thing hasn't changed: the Knicks still suck. So let the record show.
Yeah. Well, and also
they just suck in a different way.
I wouldn't go that far, but I appreciate the Knicks slander. The last thing I want to say on this point is also like, this isn't the Cavs coming completely out of nowhere. They've had this core for the last 3 years. Really, it's been 4 years since they broke out. If I'm remembering correctly, the Hawks kind of came out of nowhere. No one really expected them to be good. We were saying, I didn't expect the Cavs to be this good, but we were saying that because of their depth, their continuity, the stability that they've had, the talent that this core four has, some things kind of, last season was like a worst case scenario for Darius Garland. We assumed it would be better. We assumed maybe Mobley would take a leap. We knew that they had a chance to come out the gates blazing. I wouldn't have predicted them to go 12-0, but this wasn't like some huge, they came out of nowhere shock. This is a team that has been building and progressing towards something like this for a while. And so again, it's just really silly to pretend that none of this matters. But I don't think it's Cavs fans saying that anyway.
I just thought another thing you need to apologize for. When we did those confidence meters on Fear the Sword, way back, you were like, you had like the bench 1 out of 10. You were like a 3.
It was like a 3. Yeah.
You led Corey to a 3. And I was like, guys, the bench isn't the problem. Like, we saw this from December, February.
They were pretty bad though. The bench was pretty bad.
I think, again, the bench wasn't the problem. The starters having like a +3 net rating in like 60 something games.
That a
was
bigger
the
problem. But yeah.
That's
but
the problem.
I'm going to hand out an apology to some members of the bench here, but I want to start off. This is a good way to just transition.
As long as it's not I'm saying,
I'm saying we're going to start off. We're like 12 minutes into the episode already. We'll save everything for that. But listen, you really can't even talk about this historic start to the year without talking about the Cavs' depth. And I'll issue some apologies. I do owe the bench an apology because this bench has really given them life throughout this run. I think last night against Chicago was probably the best example of it. The Brooklyn game was a good example too. But last night, the Cavs through 3 quarters, to me, they looked exhausted. They weren't as alert as they had been throughout this streak. It honestly just didn't look like they had it in them. Now, Chicago took a 9-point lead in the third quarter. I felt like the streak was legitimately in jeopardy. Then Kenny Atkinson, as you mentioned, he has this hunch, and he said, screw it. Dean Wade, save me, white boy. He did the meme. He put Wade at the 5, along with Jerome, Merrill, Levert, and Niang. And
multiple white boys saved him.
Yeah. You know what? They went on an immediate 9-0 run, eventually extended that run to 24-7, regained all momentum, and it basically won them the game. Dean Wade, during that stretch, he was playing the 5, was phenomenal on defense. Starts off, he has a possession against Zach LaVine above the break, stays with him all the way to the rim, forces a miss. About a play later, he's in the post defending Patrick Williams, forces him into a tough fadeaway. A little after that, in the post again. This time he blocks Williams. And then he was just protecting the rim like crazy. He stopped Kobe White down there as well, some weak side rim protection. It was an insane showing of defensive versatility, especially on a team that already has Allen and Mobley. The fact that you can rely on Wade to come in and play the 5 like that, it's really something else.
Yeah, and I think he's 6'9" ⅔, I believe. I think that's what Kenny Atkinson has said. And that's closer to like the size of Bam Adebayo than I think that people realize. That he's not a 6'6" guy out there just trying to be a center. And he's really strong. Nobody pushes him off of his spots. He has a good wingspan. So it's not that he isn't capable of playing like you're not giving up stuff. You're not trying to trot out like, PJ Tucker and play him at center and hope that you can make up for it on the other end, because he is like he's
an inch away from Jarrett Allen.
Yeah,
basically.
I mean, Jarrett Allen's hair does a lot of work.
It helps.
That was the biggest PR lie ever when we were told that the Cavs had 3 7-footers. They had 2 7-footers. Jarrett Allen's not a 7-footer.
We like to round up. It just sounds nicer.
Jarrett Allen and Dean Wade, they seem to always like go to the games together, and I've got stuck like in the hallway behind them before. They're the same height. They're not any different. It's just Jarrett.
So you're saying Dean Wade should grow an afro?
If Dean Wade had an afro, he would people would, be talking about him like the Cavs have 3 7-footers again. So, yeah, that's one of the things that I think kind of gets lost is that Dean Wade is not a small guy. So
Yeah.
for some reason he doesn't look like huge out there. I don't, you know what I mean? Like when you're
He's not
watching
as
TV,
bulky, maybe, and they've never really played him. Like he doesn't play like a center. I think is probably the biggest thing. Like he's taking spot up threes. He's not really down there in the paint. Like I've never seen Dean Wade post up. That probably has a role in it. Yeah, it's a good thing.
Yeah, we're not asking for that. So that's one of the things that it is a smaller lineup, but it's not a small lineup, like quote unquote. So I think that's one of the things that's really important. And that's one of the things that you really like about Wade is that you can do all those things. And we saw that last year in the playoffs when they trotted Dean Wade out there after he didn't play basketball for like 4 months and said, Dean, can you play center? And he kind of held up against the, like, I wouldn't say he did great at center there, but he wasn't like the reason why they lost to the eventual champions. So, Kenny Atkinson talked about this in preseason, how he wanted to have Dean Wade play the 5. I thought that was kind of crazy, not because Dean Wade couldn't play the 5, but just because where are you going to get those minutes from if everyone's healthy? And you see, a game like this where Jarrett Allen's once again, multiple bad games.
We're gonna talk about him.
Multiple, really since that Magic game. Like it's been over a week of just.
Do you want to talk about Allen since we're on it real quick? Because I think we can hit it pretty quick. Do you want to mention him?
Go for it. Yeah,
I have something if you want me to go.
He had that game where he had like 3 points against the Magic, and then the next game against the Bucks, he tried that crazy pass from underneath the basket, like he thought he was LeBron James. And he just kind of feels like I've seen people suggest he's sick. I've seen people suggest that he's dealing with something. Those are all possible. What we do know is that he's just not playing with the aggressiveness and the force that he was at the start of the year. Because in the first, I'd say 6 games, you could argue he was like the team's best player. Now you could argue he's, not among their top 6 or 7 best players if you're just looking at the last week or so. So you hope that turns around.
Yeah. And that's, one of the things that I wanted to mention there is because, I mean, listen, honestly, we probably wouldn't even have talked about Allen, but it's just, I've seen a lot of people asking about it, and I figured we might as well discuss it. Look, I mean, he sucked. He sucked the last 2 games. We don't need to dance around it. He hasn't been very good. Now, here's the thing, and you mentioned this. I don't want to even speculate on whether he's sick or if he's tired or if he's dealing with an injury. Yeah, he was actually just listed as questionable for tomorrow's game with a left knee strain. So, I think it's pretty clear he's not 100%, whether it's one of those things or like a combination. But really, and also to note, the Cavs have played 12 games already. That's the most of any team so far this season. Their schedule was really front loaded. So everyone on the roster looks a little tired. But my overall conclusion here, I'm not really worried about him. He's been bad the last few games. He also looked fantastic for most of the run before that. He's had these stretches like this throughout the regular season where he just looks a little out of it for some reason. It happens. I feel pretty confident he's going to bounce back and be fine.
Are we going to see some Tristan Thompson minutes tomorrow?
I hope not, but you never know. I don't know if Tristan's even expecting it. I think this is the role that he thought he was signing up for when he came back to the Cavs. He was going to be on the bench. Last year, they had him playing like 15 minutes a game. I don't think he was ready for that. He did good, to be fair, but
yeah, I mean, at the start of the year. And has he played any I don't think he's played any meaningful minutes.
I don't think so, no.
So
pretty sure
he could, I mean, because if Allen doesn't go, you would think they're starting Wade. So then you're going to have a back, your forward rotation is going to be George Niang, and they would probably close small unless Wade's playing well. But you're probably going to have to get a couple minutes there from Tristan if you want to keep the 10-man rotation. So that's something, or JT Thor. I don't know. JT Thor.
I've seen some people mention that. I'd feel a little more comfortable giving Tristan the run this early on. I don't know if Thor is exactly ready, but it's an option if Kenny has a hunch.
Yeah, he's played. He had a pretty good game with the Charge on Sunday, so that's something. He looks pretty good. I think he could do some things. He's not doing the same things that you want Tristan Thompson to do. And that's one of the things that I think Tristan fit in really well with JB's offense because he was a super good screen setter. And that's one of the things that, as you mentioned, when you just run a lot of high pick and rolls, you need good screen setters. So I don't think JT Thor is a good screen setter at the NBA level like Tristan. So it just kind of depends on what you want. And I think Kenny could make them both work.
Yeah, I think it's going to be interesting to see what direction they take. I want to bring it back to that small ball lineup that we saw in Chicago because got to mention Ty Jerome. Now, Ty Jerome, he's being called the microwave, which I'm not a big fan of that nickname. Tristan gave it to him. It's too broad. Like we've heard the term microwave scorer for decades. You can't just call him microwave. No. That's like calling Mobley the protector. It's just too broad. A nickname needs a little more flair than that. It's like Dean Wolf. That's a good nickname. I know Corey likes the Wolverine for Dean. You don't like either. I'm a Dean Wolf guy. I think the Dean Wolf works. It's a pun, But anyways, Jerome, he has been an instant impact player. Whether it's those games where he has like 13 points in the second quarter, he's done that a handful of times this season, or just changing the game with his defense. One thing that I love about him, you'll see a lot of NBA players kind of pretend to pick up full court. Like they're picking up full court, but they're not really applying ball pressure. There's like 1% of the league that actually picks up full court, like Jose Alvarado, Gary Payton, even Dennis Schroeder. Ty Jerome is one of them too. You can't be lazy bringing the ball up the floor around him because he will legitimately sell out 50 feet from the basket to get a steal. I think he's taking a lot of people by surprise with those plays. And he was incredible again last night doing that. First, he kind of gets their momentum back with those hustle plays and steals. They had like 2 extra possessions off of that, another steal out in the break. And then he gets the scoring going too, which he's such a funny, like unorthodox type of scorer, but he was breaking down the Bulls one-on-one. It's like a floater. He had a handful of buckets to keep things rolling, and he's done that all year long. So it's been a great year for Ty Jerome. I don't owe him an apology because I was on this train before anyone else. Well, not before anyone else, but I was there with the early comers.
I mean, you were the only one on the train,
I think I saw a couple other people there,
I actually other idiots.
I owe him a slight apology because I compared him to Ricky Rubio, and everyone kind of talked me out of that, and I backed down really quickly because even sending that tweet, I was like, like he's not as good as Ricky Rubio, but he should be trying to play that role. And then I backed off it, and now
he's better than Ricky Rubio now.
Okay, a lot of people are, but I still, in Ricky Rubio's defense, he was better than Ty Jerome is right now. But Ty Jerome,
very bold of you to say.
He's doing one hell of a Ricky Rubio impression. Is all I know.
I just keep waiting for the Ty Jerome to kind of come back to earth. Maybe this is just kind of who he is.
This is who he is.
At some point,
don't hold your breath.
At some point, you have to have a conversation about, does he deserve more earlier minutes? Because right now he's kind of, to bring him out to start the second quarter, he's kind of playing the Sam Merrill role from last year, where it was like, we'll give you minutes in the second quarter. If you do something great, if you don't, we'll just keep things moving. So he's kind of really should be in the top 8 of the rotation now if you had to. So, I don't like to say anything like somebody should take Sam's spot, but he probably should be up there with Karis, coming in the same time Karis LeVert does instead of Sam. So he's just playing good. He's just a good basketball player. He fits really well with Darius. Fits really well with Mitchell. So, you can do a lot of different things when you have bigs like Allen and Mobley who are so versatile on the defensive end. You can get away with some unconventional lineups that don't, that wouldn't make sense if you had prime Tristan Thompson as your center.
Can the NBA give Ty Jerome and Karis LeVert both 6th man of the year, or does that go against the award? Because technically you can't both be the 6th man. Can they share the award this year?
I mean, if they had a 9th man of the year, which is what he is in the rotation, he would definitely win that one. I think we can all agree on that. Nobody, only 2 other teams have a 9th man. So,
Well, Karis LeVert, I've already given you many apologies, but I will apologize again. He would legitimately be the guy who's in the 6th man of the year running to me. He hasn't been as noticeable the last few games because Ty Jerome has kind of just come off the bench and been a madman, but Karis LeVert's playing fantastic basketball.
Like, he basically played the 4 against the Nets down the stretch, and it worked. So I know he Jerome and Darius kind of get the spotlight for how they played down the stretch there, and Mobley obviously, but Karis held his own, and that allowed the Cavs to that made it all work.
Yeah, Karis has, even in the last few games where he hasn't been as loud in terms of his stats, he's been very, very good. But I know that Jackson, you've been dreading this moment, but I also have to issue one more apology. George Niang, you were on the path to redemption, my friend. He's on his way. I tweeted this during the game, but I know things have changed because when Niang fell down last night during that run and he was holding his hand, like maybe he was hurt. And I legitimately was like, oh man, I hope they don't have to take him out of the game. He's playing so good. I've never felt that way about Niang. Now, even last season, obviously I would never root for him to get hurt, but there was never a moment where I was like, please don't take Niang out of the game. Like, we really need him right now. Last night, that was the case. I was legitimately like, dang, this would suck if he has to come out of the game because he was playing really well. Look, I've never really said that I'm looking for more Niang minutes, and that's not the case right now. I think keep him right where he is. Let's not push it too far. But right now, he's playing his role basically to perfection. He's doing a very good job so far. So shout out to George Niang. You're on the way to redemption.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to co-sign everything that you said there. But I will say that I think Niang's a good example of how Kenny Atkinson has really allowed everyone on this team to be the best version of themselves. George Niang, when he's out there, he's just playing basketball, if that makes sense, where he's not just filling one particular role or just doing one particular thing. He's out there touching the ball, bringing the ball up the court. If he has an opening, he's going to try to take it to the basket. He's going to, make passes out of it. He's just playing like a complete basketball player. And it's easy to forget that, NBA players are really good basketball players. And if you let them play basketball, a lot of times good things can happen. And I think that's what you're seeing with Niang, where he's not pressing, trying to just do this one skill or, being hunted constantly on the defensive end. So I think that's really showing through. I wouldn't go as far as saying Niang's a great player or somebody that I would trust in the playoffs, but I think in the regular season, he's shown through these 12 games that he is somebody that you're comfortable having on the court, which is not what I could have said last year.
Yeah, I mean, that's basically how I feel. Now I want to transition and close things out by talking about the closer, Cleveland's newest closer, Darius Garland. He has been seriously one of the best clutch players in the NBA to start this season.
Say it with your chest.
He's been the best. I know you said he's been the best, and I'm gonna pass it off to you in a second because you wrote a great story for the blog on this. But DG, he's having a fantastic start to the season in the clutch. Fourth quarters haven't always been kind to him. He actually shot below 30% in the clutch in each of his last 2 seasons. Even in his All-Star year, the clutch wasn't his strong suit. He shot 36% there. Like I said, you wrote a great story for Fear the Sword, so I want to hear from you. How has Darius performed in the clutch, and what's the difference between then and now?
I think the difference is just how much he's how forcefully he's attacking off the ball and on the ball, and the speed that he's always had when he's kind of playing at that speed. It just allows him to, find the openings. He's just really just taking what the defense is giving him. I know that sounds really simple and cliche, but you see him, if he comes and gets the ball from Jarrett Allen, if he comes and he's coming off of a pick and roll, he's not just slowly kind of getting around that. He's sprinting around that. And that forces the defense, the defense can't trap him if he's coming out at that speed. That'd be a blocking foul. The defense can't, wait for him to kind of get in the lane and do that floater if he's going at half speed. But when he's going at full speed, they have to make a decision. And I think the Bucks game shows it perfectly. One, because the Bucks have the worst defense known to man. So it kind of illustrates it really cleanly. But, he comes around the corner really hard. And if his guy is trying to, if his guy was trying to take away the three, he says, fine, I'm just going to keep going, getting downhill. I can get this floater. He's hitting his floaters at like 75% right now. It's ridiculous. That's like an automatic shot. So, if he gets downhill, he can get to that floater. If they really overhelp, he can drop it off to one of the bigs. But you also see, well, if he starts doing that and the defense starts adjusting, getting like sagging back to the paint, he can just snatch it back, and he's hitting threes at like 45% this year. So, he's just making the right read constantly. And he always made the right read before. It's just, he's making it at a much quicker, he's doing it with much more force, which is allowing him to, those openings are much bigger than they were previously. And that's what's made all the difference. And his outside shot will come back to earth because no one can shoot as well from three as he currently is. So there will be some regression there. But if he's consistently attacking inside the paint and making those right decisions, teams are never going to just be comfortable letting him take an off the dribble three, considering how good of a shooter he is. So it just adds another dimension to this team that already has Donovan Mitchell, who is a pretty good basketball player in his own right.
Yeah, I mean, he's pretty good. I think we've seen a lot of subtle changes with Garland. Like you were mentioning him just coming off of screens faster. Against Brooklyn, there was a play where they get a stop and he kind of grabs the rebound. And, Brooklyn's back on defense. This isn't like a breakout transition opportunity, but he sprints up the floor with the ball. And I think in the past, especially like final 2 minutes of the game, he's probably walking that up the court. And it takes like 8 seconds to get into the clock. He ran all the way down the court, gets a screen from Mobley, sees the defenses and drop, pulls right up for a mid-range jumper, knocks it down. It took 7 seconds off the clock. So it's little things like that. Because if he did walk it up the floor, well, now the defense is really set up and he might not get as good of an opportunity. So it's little things like that. And I think overall, I think our boy, Darius Garland, has just grown up. I think he's matured as a player. Even when you just look at the pictures from like media day this year versus recent years, he just looks grown up. He turns 25 in January. This is his 6th NBA season. So I think he's just matured a lot. I think he's gotten reps under his belt now. He's gone through struggles in the clutch, which in a way I think helps you become a better clutch player because he looks to me like he's learned some valuable lessons from that experience. Like we just mentioned, all these little things. And you said it, he's making good decisions with the ball. Like, look, I don't expect him to shoot. He's shooting 78% in the clutch right now. He's going to start missing some shots. He's not going to continue shooting that well. But the important thing is he's making the right decisions every step of the way, whether it's, the read he always has to make is whether it's pass or score, because the defense plays him differently in these scenarios. Sometimes they'll sit back on Allen and Mobley and not let him dump off to the big men, kind of daring him to shoot the floater. And other times when he really has it going, he can get an extra help defender to step out. And in recent seasons, he hasn't always made the right decision there. This year, he's not overthinking it. He's not pressing the issue. He's been in the driver's seat, attacking the defense with authority. And last night, for example, we mentioned Donovan Mitchell. I don't think I've ever in the last 3 years had a game where I preferred Darius handling the ball late in games over Donovan. But that's how I felt last night because Garland just had it going and I felt more comfortable. And Mitchell had like 36 points or something.
37.
So 37 and 25 of those came in the first half. So it wasn't like Mitchell was having a bad night or anything, but I trusted Garland at the end there. And that's what makes the Cavs scary, like you mentioned, because both Garland and Mitchell have closed games this season. They're both capable of doing it.
Yeah, and you can't. One of the things is that I think if you could load up on him, like say you could against a Damian Lillard in Portland when you don't really have a great second option, I think you could expect some regression from that. And obviously he will not be shooting 78% at the end of the year in the clutch. But a lot of the looks that he's getting, like you go back and look at him, you're like, yeah, that's a pretty high percentage look. He's going to hit that floater more often than not. Like, oh yeah, that's a mid-range shot that you would definitely take. Like he's not he's not being a tough shot maker in the clutch. Like he's not Kyrie Irving on the Cavs in 2013, who made every clutch shot, but was, had three guys draped on him and it was a fadeaway and you couldn't believe it went in. Like these are like super high percentage looks. So, I think I'm not going to say he's like the most clutch player in the NBA for the season, but there's no reason why he shouldn't be a positive impact player down the stretch of games like we saw if he's going to keep playing this style.
Yeah, the process has just been perfect. And even, we mentioned Donovan being a good closer, but Evan Mobley has been really lights out in the clutch too. I mean, he's converted some big plays for them, really just filling in perfectly. And he's kind of, quietly built up a reputation for that. I know he hit the game winner against Phoenix 2 years ago. He hit the game-winning three against Philly. He had a big N1 against Boston in the playoffs. So yeah, I kind of think Mobley has a little bit of it in him too, but he's never going to be the guy who gets the ball in those moments. It's going to be run through Garland or Mitchell. But when you have a team that has three guys who is really performing and executing at a high level in the clutch, you're going to win 12 games in a row, pretty much.
Yeah, and it also just helps. And I think this is where there is some room for improvement, is that you kind of would rather have Darius handle the ball in the clutch because Donovan isn't somebody who can throw the lob the way Darius can. Like Donovan is good at, finding the bigs, but not, he's not to Darius Garland's level, which is a hard standard to live up to. So I think there's room for him to improve how he's moving off ball. And I think that's something that that's something that I'm going to be looking at for the rest of the season. Like, can he become a more impactful off ball player in the way that, Darius really has when he doesn't have the ball? So I think there's room for this team to get even, for the process to get even better. The results aren't going to get better, but the process could get better.
Yeah, and to that note, I have one final thing that I want to say before we wrap up and just talking about little things that could maybe improve. Listen, I'll take a 36, 37-point night from Donovan Mitchell any game, but one thing that has become a little bit of a trend that I'm not complaining, but I would like to see if they can make this even better, is that we're seeing Mitchell come out and set the tone early. It's like 5 games in a row, I feel like, where he has 15 in the first quarter.
Yeah.
But then he kind of cools off as the game goes on. And I don't know if it's because he's tired from, really seeking out his shot in the first half or what exactly it is. But we've seen a couple games now where he's gone off in the first half and then really cooled off in the second. I would like to see if they can maybe find a little bit of a balance, because as much as I would love Donovan to give us 25 in the first half every night, I also want him to still look like himself at the end of games, which he has at certain points this season. He was great at the end against New Orleans, obviously hit the game winner against Milwaukee, but it seems like there's maybe a little bit of a balance that they're still searching for there.
Yeah, and the third quarters have been absolutely awful.
Have been so bad, yeah.
Kenny is losing his mind about these third quarters, so hopefully for his sake, they wake up. And that's something that I'd like to see, Donovan kind of break them out of those third quarter slumps that they're in, because it seems like once it becomes a trend and about it, it's like harder to reverse the trend. So you'd like to see them have a good third quarter. And, there's no better team to do it than the Sixers, who are playing tonight. So
that's going to do it for this episode of the Junkyard Pod. If you enjoyed this episode and you want to support us, go follow on Apple, Spotify, and YouTube. Leave a comment, drop a like, do it all, because it all really helps. Me and Jackson will be hosting the live Cavs watch party on Playback and YouTube tomorrow. So make sure you tune in for that. And with all that being said, go Cavs.
Go to fearthesword.com, guys. We are writing good stuff there. And I agree, go Cavs. Brian, I don't see you in the comments on Fear the Sword. What is the deal with that?